what's inside the covers of the Lightning Literature and Composition Grade 2. If you've not seen the Lightning Lit range before, then I guess we should briefly cover that first. So Hewitt Homeschooling are a Christian homeschool company, but we've now used a few different grades from the Lightning Literature program and really have found them all to be secular in nature. So really this program works, in my opinion, for anyone regardless of religion. So in a nutshell, Lightning Lit is almost a complete language art program. It covers literature, grammar mechanics, along with composition. But it does not cover handwriting, spelling, or phonics instruction. So you would need to add those in. What I do love about Lightning Lit is that it uses great books to build the lessons around. And the other great thing about it is it's all open and go. So if you follow the format in regards to how the lessons are laid out, you will work with one picture book before moving on to another book at the beginning of the following week. So one picture book a week, along with reading chapter books together that is spread out across several weeks of the program. But the main focus is around reading and working with one particular picture book each week. As the year progresses, the program does move into lower level chapter books that the student will work with then over a series of lessons rather than completing a book a week. So the grade 2 program, as you can see, contains both a student workbook and a teacher's guide. And this is definitely a case of you do really need to purchase both of the books. They really work together. If all you do is use, let's say, the student workbook, you will miss out on many of the composition activities that are included in the teacher's guide. Given you probably don't need to use the teacher's guide from cover to cover, but it does contain all of the literature activities required to complete the program as a whole. It also contains all the discussion questions, answers to student work pages, and a lot of helpful information for the teacher or guide for the program. So let's take a quick look inside the student workbook. So first up, what I love is that it's hole punched and the pages are really easy to take out. So if you're someone that likes to break up your programs into weekly lessons, into binders ready for your child to complete, you'll love that about the Lightning Lit program. The thing you'll notice first up, and I'm just going to flip through quickly to begin with, is how bright and colourful the worksheet pages are for the students. And then the other thing to take note of is how few worksheets there are that cover a span of a lesson in a week. This is not an overwhelming program for the student in any way, shape or form. But I'll talk a little bit more about that later. For now, I just wanted to show you a brief visual of the student workbook, just as a bit of an overview. You will notice that there's a reading journal activity for each book. This acts somewhat as a mini book report, I guess you would say. And then the worksheets themselves tend to focus more on grammar concepts, with the composition activities being included in the teacher's guide, as I mentioned earlier. For a child at around a grade 2 level, these workbook pages are not overwhelming in any way. There's enough to them to reinforce a concept, but without that busy work that you'll often find in many programs expecting the child to complete. The program also includes poetry scattered throughout, and it takes poems from the Random House book of poetry for children. So that's another great bonus, is that you get your poetry study included within the program. So you don't need to add any more unless, of course, you're a family that chooses to do so. If we do a brief comparison, let's say, of the worksheets from the very first lesson, right in the beginning of the workbook, where you will see that they're really quite simple, and then flip through to the last lesson in the workbook, and have a look at the worksheets at that level, where you would assume that the child has progressed through the years. So here we're finishing off Mr. Popper's Penguins in week 35. And as you can see, as expected, the worksheets become more involved. Therefore, working with the progression of the child and, of course, the progression of the reading levels of the book that the child is either reading on their own or reading with you, the parent educator. Okay, and now the teacher's guide. The first thing you'll notice here is that this book looks completely different to the student workbook. And yes, it is very text heavy. But one of the great things about the teacher's guide is that it thoroughly explains to you, the teacher, exactly what each component of the lesson entails. So if you have a quick look here, it will cover for you day 1, literature, the grammar and mechanics that are being covered. It'll explain to you what you're introducing and the things that you need to discuss with your child, the composition activity that they're looking at doing, and then you move in to day 2. So each week for the teacher guide is very well laid out, really easy to follow, and explains everything to you. So there's nothing that you're left scratching your head and wondering about. It will also give you all the answers to the workbook pages, and I really like that it gives you a week at a glance. So let's dive in to one particular lesson and we'll work through that together so that you can see how the student workbook works in with the teacher's guide. So I thought we would look at week 5, I believe it is, which is Insect Detective. So here we are, week 5, and I'll open the student book to week 5 as well. Okay, so in the teacher guide, you begin with your week 5 at a glance. So of course, it tells you straight away the book for the week is the Insect Detective. And just to show you the level of the picture book chosen for week 5. So of course, this will depend on the reading level of your child as to whether they can read this independently or whether it is something that you need to work together on. What you'll also notice is that behind the scenes, you and your child together are also reading in Winnie the Pooh. And you're reading roughly half a chapter each week as you work through the Lightning Literature program. It also provides some optional materials, so some more books, and also books about insects and discovering nature. So the focus for this particular week is going to be on ending punctuation. So periods, question marks, exclamation points. And the composition piece will be an experience exploring the outdoors or write a report on an insect. And something you will see as we get into this lesson is that the child isn't just given one option for a composition piece. They are given at least a couple of ideas so that they're not boxed in to just having to write about one particular thing. Okay, so day 1. Day 1, literature. And it tells us here exactly what we need to do. Read Insect Detective with your child, ask the following questions, and record the responses in the space to the right. So of course, that part of the program is completely up to you. You might like to jot down the child's narration so that you can see progression throughout the book, because that is something that is supplied for each particular lesson. So it gives you the questions to ask and will also give you little hints of appropriate responses that the child might give you. So then still on day 1, we're looking at the grammar and mechanics. So today I cover end punctuation, period, question mark, exclamation point. So it tells you what to do, introduce the idea, and this is where we open up our student workbook. And here you can see we're looking at end punctuation. When a sentence tells us something, it ends with a period. How does a question end? With a question mark. So we're simply having the child go through and choose the appropriate end punctuation for each particular sentence on this page. And that is it. That's the only piece of worksheet work that is included in the program for the first day of the book. And then once we've completed the grammar mechanics, we move on to composition. And it lets us know this week your student will either do one of the activities on pages 29 to 30 of Insect Detective. So in the back of this book, there are activities, okay? So it's suggesting to do one of those. A nature walk can be interpreted broadly here, especially if you don't have access to a wooded area, pond, etc. For example, a child could spend time in their backyard or in a park carefully looking for insects. If your child is afraid of insects, use the nature walk to more carefully examine other things, plants, small animals, etc. If it is impossible for your child to have direct contact with nature, you can write another research report, this time on any insect of your child's choice. Simply follow the pattern of the last week. Remember, we're looking at week 5, so it does progress as the weeks move on. So today, either complete one of the activities from Insect Detective or any other insect viewing activity of your choice, or go on your nature walk. And then we're on to day 2. So day 2 for the literature component, we are looking at the fact that this is a non-fiction book rather than a story. And then the grammar and mechanics for day 2 is looking at sentence diagramming. So of course, sentence diagramming at this level is really very simple, but it does give you the answers in this teacher's guide, and this is the page for the beginning level of diagramming sentences for the student. From there, it moves on to working through the composition. So what you'll notice here is the composition piece or the writing piece isn't something that's handed to the student and says, okay, here you go, we're now going to write a report, sit there for 3 hours and get that done. It's broken down into small bite-sized chunks that you work on each day over the week. And I really like that about this program. So today, it's note-taking day for your paper. If your child did one of the projects in Insect Detective, have them write some notes about what they did for the preparations, how they carried out the project, and what the results were. These don't need to be complete sentences. They're just notes. So the child is simply taking notes of what they did. And once you finish the note-taking, then it possibly is time to have a look at the reading journal pages. So that is these here. So this is where the student will write in their own words what the book is about, what they think of the book, and what their favourite sentence of the book is. And this then becomes, as I said earlier, like a little mini book report. And these are included for every single book within the program. And then we're on to day 3. So we're back at literature and we're reading the book again with the child and we're asking the following questions. And of course, there is a space to record their responses if you choose. So the grammar and mechanics for this is to choose 5 to 10 words to put in the dictionary pages. So you'll have a look right at the back of the book. And there's a dictionary section that they will work on and build on throughout the full year. For extra challenge, if you have a child that likes those extra challenges, aim for 10 words and require that 1 or more be from the book. And this is what I really like about this program, that it gives you lots of options, because not all grade 2 children are always going to be at that perfect grade 2 level for, reading, grammar and composition skills. So you do have the flexibility here to work with where your child is at. And then we have day 3, where we're looking back and we're finding, or we're filling in the blanks on this particular page about the book. To fill in the blank with the correct insect and draw a line to its picture. And the composition for day 3 is your child will write a rough draft of their paper. So do not do this in the composition book, but instead just use a scratch piece of paper or a computer, depending on what is more comfortable for you and your child. And just focus on the content. So take notes, take the notes that you wrote from yesterday, and then work on transforming them into complete sentences. To encourage your child to add any external or internal details that would make the paper more interesting. For example, yesterday's notes could turn into something like this. And then we move into day 4. So day 4 for literature We're going to begin reading the chapter 3 of Winnie the Pooh. So remember I explained earlier that we're also reading a chapter book kind of behind the scenes as we're working on the picture book programs of, as we're working on the picture book lessons of this program. Has some questions to answer, and then grammar and mechanics, we are adding in adjectives to our diagramming sentences, and this is the workbook page for that particular activity. One thing to point out, you do not need to know how to diagram sentences as the parent educator, because it explains it all to you and gives you the answers directly here in the teacher guide. For the composition today, final draft time. It's time to review the draft together and either type it up or write it out neatly, either in a composition book, or you might allow your child to type it, whatever is the best option for you and your child. So one thing to note is that day 5 is a free day. So depending on your family circumstances and your child, you may like to spread that composition activity out over into that 5th day. You may like to just take the day off, or this is where you can bring in some of those extending the lesson activities. So you'll see in the student book that there is no day 5 to the week. We get straight into the very next book or the very next lesson. So that is Lightning Literature and Composition Grade 2. If you happen to be new here, please allow me to introduce myself quickly. My name is Kylie and I have been homeschooling my 3 kids since 2007. On my channel, I cover all things homeschool, from book reviews to curriculum flip-throughs, homeschool day in the life, to any bits and pieces of encouragement, hints and tips that I've gleaned over my years of homeschooling. If that's the sort of information you are on the lookout for, be sure to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss future videos. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you all again soon. Bye for now.